Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, April 25th, 2011. Roll call, please.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Item 2, report regarding posting the agenda. The agenda of this meeting was posted on or before Tuesday, April 19, 2011, on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Next item is approval of minutes of March 28, 2011. Anyone have?
Already noted a call from Commissioner Vidor about a missing vote on item 7B, and that's already been amended.
Okay.
Record.
Any other corrections or?
No.
Take a motion to approve the minutes of March 28, 2011.
I move we approve the minutes of March 28th, 2011.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Next item is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The Commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. I don't have anything on oral communication. I deem that we'll close the oral communication period. And we'll move on to Commissioner comments or comments from commissioners. If I may start, I want to mention that tomorrow at City Council there will be a resolution by the Mayor Friedman designating May as a Historic Preservation Month. So I encourage my commissioner, all our commission to attend, and anybody in support of preservation. And this is a great honor. And again, I encourage everyone to attend, from the public and the historical societies of both Crescenta and the Glendale Historical Society. And with that, I'll take any other comments from my other commissioners.
I just have an announcement of an interesting seminar that people may be interested in at the LA Arboretum on Thursday, April 28th at 9:30 in the morning in the Palm Room. It's $20 admission, and it's called Past Landscapes, Present Tense, The Evolution of the Southern California Landscape. Rhett Beaver is landscape architect, and he's going to talk about remnants of local landscapes from the 19th century onward, being increasingly endangered by redevelopment, old age, oblivion, and learning, how we can identify and preserve interesting heritage landscapes. So I just thought I would make everyone aware of it. It sounds like a really interesting topic, and landscape is something we've discussed on this commission in the past. So that's it.
Anyone else?
I would like to make a comment on the Glendale Historical Society has an upcoming event. This is something that's near to my heart. It's Ride the Big Red Cars to Glendale. It's May 12th, 2011 at 7 p.m. at the Glendale Public Library at 222 East Harvard Street, and it's free. It will be presented by local historian Paul Ayers, presenting a slideshow on the Glendale Pacific Electric Line from its beginning to the last days of service in 1955. Over 240 slides, including past and present images of the route. We'd like to thank all of our friends at the Glendale Public Library, and we encourage you all to come. It will give you a kind of a overview of how Glendale itself was developed over the years, because the Pacific Electric from 1904 on was definitely one of the main ways that Glendale became the way Glendale is. And anyway, I invite everyone in the city of Glendale and any other place to come and see this show. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to item 6, old business, consideration of commission-generated proposal for future discussion regarding HPC policies and goals. And
This is your chance to bring up either new topics that the Commission would like to entertain discussion of, or to look at the proposed topics in the top box and see if any of those have gotten to a point where you'd like to move them forward to actually agendizing them.
Anyone wants to add anything, or?
And also, please verify when I move things to the resolved topics section, to the best of my ability, I'm kind of in a short way synopsizing what the discussion was, so that might be a chance to notice if there's anything that I missed.
Okay.
Mr. Platt, I don't have anything to add, but I was just wondering what we're planning to do once we actually come up with a policy or resolve our issue going forward, or making the information or the policy changes visible to the public and to City Council, how we'll be handling that.
Something like the changing of the naming policy, I distributed just kind of a hard copy for you. Generally, those are in-house policy issues. It's the Commission's decision. It doesn't need to go to Council. We had talked about, the issue of when we do go back to Council with names, we'll mention the policy in our kind of staff presentation, but we wouldn't hand them a copy of this policy.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
That way we can educate on each and every hearing opportunity. So.
Commissioner Tafagi, you have anything?
And then also if everyone could review the actual naming policy, which I believe is what we had asked for, and a lot of it was based on the recommendations of the Historical Society.
And what's the process for passing this on to future commissioners?
We'll put it in the Commissioner Handbook. There'll always be overlap between commissioners, so it should be an ongoing policy.
Okay. Well, Commissioner Tafagi, did you have anything you want to add and discuss, or Mr. Morgan?
No.
No.
Commissioner Shar, no? Anybody wants to agendize any of these items, the remaining items? I don't mind discussing the solar panel installation if that's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fine.
It's a good one.
Yeah, so last month I handed out a couple of things that had just happened to come hot off the press on that topic, so if you want to review that. And also, I'll try to send you a copy. There's legislation going through the state Senate and Assembly that will possibly limit our ability as a commission and as a city to tell people that they cannot put solar installations on their property. So we'll address that, and I'll try to get an update from the city attorney to see where that stands for the next hearing.
Okay. Because we have some new installations on some of the districts, I noticed. Can you provide us photographs?
Well, you know something I don't know. I haven't heard about new installations on
I think it
properties
was
in
in the Ardevine district, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, if you can direct me toward it, I could
I could
take
be
some
wrong on the
pictures,
block,
check
but I'll
on
double check. Okay, so we'll agendize solar panel installation. I need a motion. 1 second.
I move to agendize a solar panel installation discussion to our next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Franken?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We'll move on to new business. Proposed, actually 7A, proposed Brockmont Park Historic District Review petition requesting historic resources survey.
If you remember at last month's hearing, the applicants for the proposed Brockmont Park District had not, prior to the hearing, acquired all of the signatures they needed to move this forward in the process. They needed the signatures of owners of 25% plus one property of the designated or of the nominated properties. But on that day, we did receive a copy of 23 properties with signatures, which represents 40% of the total, so it's well over the minimum requirement. What I do when I get these is go through them, look at our latest update from the assessor's record to make sure that the owners that are signing this or the owners that at least are the most recent records show as being the owner, and then especially pay careful attention to make sure that when properties are under joint ownership or multiple parties ownership that we have the signatures of each party. So you'll see on, I believe, in this case, in the past we've had to disqualify some signatures where we don't see that we have both parties signing in that case. I believe in this case all of these signatures were determined to be valid. So the commissioners vote today. If you recognize that this meets the requirements of the ordinance, will then authorize the city to go forward with the Historic Resources Survey. In the case of Brockmont Park, we're very lucky because a consultant who meets the Secretary of the Interior standards for doing these kinds of surveys has volunteered to prepare the survey for us. And this will save the city, a good amount of money, and it's very exciting to have the potential for a high-quality survey at limited cost to the city, so we're grateful for that. And so in authorizing this, will allow this survey to go forward.
Thank you. And this little notation at the corner, this is 40%, is that what you?
Correct. 40%, yeah.
40%, okay. Okay. I have one speaker. Do you have any questions, anyone, before I open the public hearing? No? Becky Maxwell, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to you all for letting us go forward, and I don't know if you have any questions or anything. There really isn't much to tell from the last time we were here, but we're going to push forward now, and I'm sure we'll have no problem. There's a tremendous interest in everybody in the neighborhood, and I know everybody in the neighborhood well. So we'll push forward, and thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
We'll close the public portion. Does anyone have any questions or anyone discussion on it? Not at this. Okay, well, we'll take a motion.
I move to approve the petition for the Brockmont Park Historic District and proceed with the survey.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's done.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
We'll go to 7B. It's 1345 Cordova Avenue, Glendale Register nomination and the Mills Act application. Go to Jay.
Okay. Let's see. Whoa. Okay, here we are on 1345 Cordova Avenue. This is up in the hillier part of the proposed Ross Moines Historic District. And we're looking at a house of striking architectural interest, we found when we were looking at it and comparing it to some of the other houses in the neighborhood. It was built in 1928, and it was designed by someone named Ben Sherwood, who's a designer of some interest, but we don't know enough about him or his career to make any big assessments. We don't know if he's done other work in Glendale or not. But when we look at this house, we see that it's taking a lot of aspects of the Spanish colonial revival and then adding some kind of unique twists to it that we don't see very often. Starting at the bottom where we see this three-car garage with what appear to be either original or very early kind of doors. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't think they're original, but they're certainly appropriate to the house. And you see the round-headed gate to the right of that. That's the entrance to the house. And if you had a chance to visit, you know that you take a very interesting pathway kind of carved into the hillside as you go up there, and you kind of turn under yourself and kind of spiral your way up to the hill until you get to the landing. And when you look at the bottom, the first story of the house is actually not the primary story of the house. The primary living spaces are up on the second floor, where there's yet another stairway taking you up to that level. Here's just a shot to show where we are up on Cordova, near the intersection with Rosemount. And the house has a lot of intact original features, a lot of original ironwork, some very interesting tile work. What's especially interesting here is that, we have light fixtures. We have these sun curtains, these exterior curtain rods that you see every so often on these houses. But what really is most striking are these two kind of round features. The turret on the right, that when I wrote up the staff report and was thinking about it, I was like, it does look kind of like a lighthouse. I don't know if everyone felt that way, but it has little round porthole windows down at the bottom, literally portholes now. And then when you look over on the left side, you see this tapered round chimney that gives the house a real strong vertical emphasis that's especially dramatic when you're looking at it from the street, when it's raised up so high. You also have this interesting flagstone work, and I couldn't tell if this was original. It reminded me of some of our other designated properties, and it's so consistently used that it very likely is, but it's not what I would think is the classic the kind of work that you'd expect on these walkways and retaining walls. This is a picture of Disney Court. I couldn't find it, literally, and so I found this on the internet, so it's not a great picture. But this was designed by Ben Sherwood, and it seems like he definitely had some kind of way with fanciful architecture, and I think that works its way into this example of Spanish colonial architecture. Even over on the left side where you see the wall that steps down to the left side of the chimney, you look at that from the street and you're not sure why it's there. There's probably a stairway behind it, but then when you get inside you realize it's a beautiful little outdoor courtyard with an outdoor fireplace, and that's where some of the fine tile work is located. This is the second floor entrance, so this kind of parabolic arch with the gate and an elaborate wood door was the primary entrance, but I think today it's not used that way because it's yet another schlep up a flight of stairs, so it's like, okay, come in the other door. Here's an example or a shot of the door and then the ironwork at the front. And then here's the courtyard that you can't actually see from the street, along with the tile work that's, the applicant tells us, is identified as Malibu tile. I'm sorry, whoa. Oh, I think I put the wrong name in the staff report then. Okay, Catalina tile.
Catalina.
We'll make a change for that. And just a nice secluded courtyard that's very typical of Spanish houses, but this one seems even more kind of secluded than you expect. And then when you look up from the courtyard, you have this other secondary stairway going up to the landing, and you have some very nice woodwork up there as well. The back of the house and the sides of the house don't really carry that architectural detailing. They're much more plain. And I think part of that is because the site's really cut into the hill, so you have a limited amount of access around the side and back areas. On the left, in the top photo on the left, and then in the foreground in the lower photo, you can see where the 80 square foot kitchen addition was made. When we looked at it, it seems very appropriate to the house. You can see it in this architectural drawing. It's not visible from the street and definitely carries the look of the windows in the house all the way through. The house has a lot of what appear to be original windows, but it also has a number of replacement windows. But all of those replacement windows are wood windows with true divided lights, and they look appropriate to the house, even though there's some subtle differences between the replacement windows and the original ones. And then here's a view of the two side facades where you really don't have much going on except for walkways getting you up to the backyard. And if you had the pleasure of visiting and you're on the left side in the left picture, you have a gate that none of us, I don't think, could make it through. So it's kind of like a cat gate or something.
Well, I made it through. I made it through.
Hey. Good for you, Vic. So this was one of these houses in Ross Moines where, as we've always said, until we get the results of our survey back, and actually I shouldn't even say that because the survey we're conducting isn't going to be identifying the highest character houses in the neighborhood. It's only identifying contributors and non-contributors. But this house definitely has character and something different than many of the other Spanish houses we're used to seeing, even some of the nicest examples. But we couldn't make the first part of finding for criterion D. But staff definitely feels it's an exemplary example, not just an outstanding example of architectural design, details, materials, and craftsmanship. And the owner, Steve Finkelstein's here if you have any questions or questions for me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shea. Any questions to?
I do. Is this within the Ross Moines Historic District?
Yeah.
It is. Cordova is, okay. Because it's part of Brockmont Slopes, but they're incorporating it into the...
Yeah, no, this is part of the original Ross Moines
Okay.
development. The tract name is a little different. So.
Okay.
A question, Commissioner Shire? No. Commissioner Tafire, no?
No.
Thank you. And Mr. Frankenstein? Would you like to say anything?
Come up to the
If you-
microphone. Introduce yourself.
I'm Steve Finkelstein. I own the home at 1345 Cordova. I want to thank all of you for taking it into consideration for historic preservation, and for all of you that did make it out. Thank you for spending the time there. For those that you didn't, you're always welcome. The house itself was a labor of love. I had a great deal of fun restoring it, if not wherever possible, back to its original details when I did do something like remodeling the kitchen or the bathroom, at least to the period. The style is all within keeping of 20s and 30s.
Should let the commission know about your light fixtures if
Yes,
they didn't hear.
Oh, the one, oh yeah, and where,
interior.
yeah. The house, as far as I can tell, has all of its original light fixtures, and there were a few that were missing when I moved in. I just simply had holes and wires hanging out of them, and I took the where the various matching ones to a metal fabricator. I think one of you mentioned you knew of in Pasadena. And he duplicated them virtually identically, and I purposely mixed them into the original ones, and you can tell them apart. So even like that exterior feature for the kitchen, the beams up above that were replaced when the roof line had to be raised in the kitchen, I took one of the old beams that had the contractor stencil it out, and the new ones are identical to the old ones in every way possible. So wherever I could, I either duplicated or restored to the original style, or at least kept within keeping the style of the house.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Including restoring the dumbwaiter.
Tell us about the opium den.
The opium den is that the lower area of the turret. I'd never heard it referred to as a lighthouse, but when you were describing it that way in the pictures, I could definitely see where it does look more like a lighthouse. That lower level, it's two round rooms, one on the lower level, one on the upper level. The one on the upper level is a breakfast nook, and the one on the lower level, best as I can figure, was probably used as a smoking room or a card room when it was first built. It can comfortably seat maybe 3 or 4, but no more than that. There's a hidden bar in the wall, so that's which made me think it was possibly a smoking or a game room. And I just simply went with kind of a Spanish Moroccan style in that room, and now call it an opium den. No smoking of any kind going on in there, but it hasn't lit. But one of the features in that room is you notice that all the windows in that room are round. And when I moved in, the original windows, and I'm quite sure they were original, they were just simply round windows that opened by tilting in and were held back by a chain. And they leaked terribly, so I had an awful lot of water and termite damage as a result of that. So when I wanted to replace them, I learned that if I wanted to keep the original feature of round windows, nobody will manufacture round windows that open, because they can't guarantee that they won't leak. So the only round windows you can get are sealed windows, which would mean that room would have no windows at all. So I contacted a boat builder and bought real brass ship's portholes, which are round, fit the holes perfectly, and they don't leak, and they do open. So it's perfect.
Good.
And it kind of goes with that lighthouse look of the house.
Beautiful.
Thank you, sir.
That's it.
Thank you.
All right.
Going back to Commissioner Morgan's question, I am going to have to double check, because I don't think it's in the district, because we know it's in the Bellhurst Hill Slopes tract. So I think I just put that in error, but I'll double check.
Yeah.
I didn't. The map, the boundary gets kind of more confusing up at the top there.
I wasn't sure whether it went above mountain.
I think it does
that's a
in
good
parts.
point. Some parts. But the good catch. I don't think
I think I may have
yeah,
missed it on this one, so I'll double check, and we'll amend the staff report.
Okay.
And also with the Catalina tiles and the Malibu tiles.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great house.
Public hearing is closed. Any question, discussion? Anybody wants to start?
Is this, I don't have any questions. Are you just taking comments now?
Comments?
And then
Yeah, comments too. If anything you have to say, and
I'll start.
go ahead. Commissioner Shire.
I really enjoyed seeing your home and just the labor of love that you have done on it. I had the pleasure of touring it. I think when it was for sale, probably before you moved in, and you've done an amazing job with the restoration. And it is such a unique Spanish-style home with just the kind of processional entry as you kind of weave back and forth in front of the house, up the stairs. It gives you time to really enjoy the fabulous view you have from the height of the house, as well as just the architecture. And the ironwork is spectacular, and the tile work, and so many unique features with the turret and the outdoor fireplace courtyard. Just a very stunning property, so thank you for caring for it so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Shire. Commissioner Morgan?
I have to agree with Commissioner Shire. I grew up, my best friend is right across the street, and I've grown up looking at this house for 40, 50 years right at the moment, and it's a gorgeous example of what Glendale was doing in the 20s, and all of the ironwork, the windows, just the way it sits on the hill is just magnificent. It's a very gorgeous house.
Thank you. Commissioner Vidor?
Yes, why the producers didn't film Mildred Pierce in Glendale, I have no clue, but that's another topic. Yeah, great.
This house is too grand.
This is too grand for Mildred's house. It could have been Monty's house. Anyway,
You're talking about the remake, not the original, right?
yeah, the remake. No, this is one of those houses, sometimes I struggle with, does it rise to the, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous historical home, but does it rise to the occasion of a landmark? And this certainly absolutely does. The elevations, the architectural detail, the massing of the house, it really is exemplary in every imaginable way. So I'm very enthusiastically supporting the landmarking of this house.
Thank you, Commissioner Vidor. Commissioner DeFang?
I would have to agree with my fellow commissioners. I've been in the house probably about 12 years ago, so I have not seen any of the upgrades. But when I did go, it was at that time very beautiful as well, and the ironwork and the woodwork, which I don't think has been changed, is beautiful. And I think it is a beautiful example of the Spanish colonial revival style. My only question, which Jay actually answered, was regarding the three-car garage. And he said it might have been original or very early on. So
The
that was
garage
my
itself looks original. We always have questions about doors and
Right.
changes to doors, but these doors look pretty right on for the period. So.
For that time to have a three-car garage, I think was...
I think it's unusual.
Unusual.
And, and very well. We don't have any permit history for enlargement, but it's possible.
Yeah. So, very nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Fagan. Well, what can I say? They've all said it all. I just fell in love with this one. Actually, I have a new icon, Ben Sherwood. And I was concerned about the stonework, and I did a little research on my own. I think that goes with it. I don't know if you've seen the Ben Sherwood house.
No, I haven't.
That's his house?
That's his house. It says, Sherwood House. And he uses the stone treatment because I thought maybe the stone was not, and I was going to ask you, Commissioner Morgan, since you've seen it for a minute, was the stone there?
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
It's been there since '63. So.
Yes, okay. So, and I said, maybe it's part of, so I said, let me check his work, and I guess he had a little stone treatment that took
interesting.
place in his house.
And this is,
This is in Las Feliz area, Romano, is it?
and it's named for him.
That's what, I didn't go too
Seems.
far, but I think I'm going to do a little research on it. Yeah, I do agree. This house is a true Hollywood Spanish revival. It's too bad our hillside guidelines doesn't permit us to be so flexible in putting these houses like that, especially the garage. But nevertheless, the one question I had about the name, I know you mentioned Gray House, but how are we taking that as a...
Well, this will be an interesting discussion. The Grays themselves, they lived in the house for 10 years. He ran an auto finance company. We don't know whether he commissioned Sherwood or not. What we know is that Sherwood did build speculatively. So that's one of the lower kind of rankings in terms of importance, if the people didn't commission or have any input in the design. I tend to go back toward addresses, but I know the commission's less inclined to do that. So
I think this house deserves a name, not just an address.
I do. Yeah.
That's why I'm bringing it. I mean, I don't have a particular way of going with the Sherwood or Gray, but I thought this house needs a name, not just in my opinion, of course. I'll leave that up to you. Lastly, do we have any work plan on this, or does it require any work plan?
Yeah, I noticed 2 items.
Yeah, we had some trouble with the formatting of everything, but according to the applicant, and he can confirm this or deny it, that there's no major work plan proposed. This would fall under this year's Mills Act applications if the council votes to bring in your recommended changes, which now looks like it'll be going to council in June for discussion. So that means we'd get the termite report, the building inspector's report. The house is already bolted, we know, but we'll get confirmation of that. So all of the things that you've asked for, and then the ongoing cycle of inspection photographs and inspection reports would kick in.
Let's make sure we include that.
And I had a question. So on the Mills Act contract application number 6, it talks about work plan. It says, for example, Are those just examples? Those aren't pertinent to this house?
Yeah, that's just built in.
Oh,
That's
okay, so
because
there's
this
no
was
work plan.
reformatted from the, when you see it on the regular form.
Yeah, it's hard to
You
tell.
can see that's just kind of an
okay.
EG kind of thing. But, yeah, so as of now, am I correct?
You did the work.
Come to the microphone, yeah.
I'm done. I've lived under construction for about 5 of the past 7 years, and there's nothing major left to do on the house other than hang pictures on the walls.
Yeah, but when we were at the house, we noticed some stucco issues
Yes,
on the
water-
walkway
water
and then at the
seepage.
foundation. So that was something that
that's
the
enough.
commission is well within their, realm to ask for that kind of work to be done.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed. There's some water seepage issues, and maybe whether it needs to be waterproofed and then painted or something on the stucco, the spiral
entryway.
staircase
yeah,
entry.
that's kind of an ongoing.
That-
I've tried painting over that, and it just seeps back through. So I've looked into. A friend of mine's an engineer, and there's apparently a penetrating product that I can apply from the outside that'll penetrate through and act as a sealant that I can then paint over, rather than having to excavate.
Right,
behind those
right. It's always-
retaining
Yeah,
walls.
the problem with those penetrating things, and the commission should note, is that that's it. And when that fails, not if, but when it fails, then the next step will be excavating, rebuilding.
Right.
So that could be decades from now, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But it lasted from 28?
Yes.
Earthquakes,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
It stays like that.
Everything I could find in the record says that retaining wall is original. It was not added.
It's in remarkable condition.
The previous owners didn't do an awful lot to maintain it, but there's a lot of issues of maintenance and upkeep, primarily termite and water damage, but they also didn't do an awful lot to mess it up. So an awful lot of the original features were there when I moved in. The ceilings with the stenciled beams, you couldn't see any of that stenciling, and all I did is wash them with a rag and distilled water and brought them back and found all that stenciling underneath. It was there, but the walls, the ceilings, the wood ceilings were completely black. You couldn't see any wood grain at all. All it took was washing them. Bring it all back.
Thank you. Since I have
It's
your...
nice when a restoration project is easy.
One question I had, it's not really a big issue, but the trellis and the barbecue in the back, is that
What was that?
the trellis, the barbecue?
The barbecue area in the back,
In the corner?
I added that.
Okay.
I added that.
Okay.
And again, the beams there were made.
I noticed that. That's a good job there.
Plasterwood, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, sir.
The only thing I would ask is if you, I was not able to find all that much information about Ben Sherwood. I'd love to be able to include it in my application, or at least know what it is.
You can include this one.
Find out what that is. That'd
This
be
is,
great.
I did a quick research. There were a few of them in Las Feliz also. He was not he was named the builder, but there's few. If you like to look
I
at it,
couldn't
then
find
we
any
can include it.
information. He was even a licensed architect.
What we do in general, just for the commission's information, is we keep files on each designated property, and as new information comes in, it gets dropped right into the file so that we have as much, we can tell people this is everything we know about the property. For some properties, that's a very slender amount of information, but recent designations, we have a fair amount. So.
Yeah, the only thing I was able to find was that reference to the Disney court.
Yes.
It seems like I was curious about Sherwood, too, and I know that you did not recommend that the association with a significant builder-designer be part of the criteria, which seems to be appropriate, but when I looked him up, it seems like, those who are interested in or study the storybook style of architecture mention him occasionally in reference to the Disney court.
Right.
And so I kind of got this gut feeling that in some circles, if you have a certain specific interest and focus in architecture, that he's probably well known in these parts, but, how well known, who knows? And, it seems like it might be interesting to consider naming the property in hyphenated form for him and Gray, if that's a possible thing for us to do. But I would also agree that you'd have to go and do more research to make him rise to the level of somebody who would be called out in the nomination. So, but there
and
was
we could always amend
storybook
names.
information on him, and all these storybook websites that talk about storybook architecture. It seems like that particular property, the Disney Court, was mentioned, and his name did come up occasionally.
Okay.
And as far as the name goes, I'm not I'm not wed to anything in particular. Gray House sounded, I guess traditionally you name it after the very first owner.
Well, we've been talking about our traditions, so. Shifting.
I'm open. I'm not going to name it after myself.
That we don't want to.
Number one.
We're never doing that again.
And a simple address designation doesn't sound too exciting.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
If
Especially
something in the research on Ben Sherwood, like I said, I couldn't find much, but if there's anything else there that would lend itself towards changing the name, that if not, I'm fine with the Gray House.
Jay, what occupation did you say the Grays had?
Mr. Gray owned a car finance
It's
business.
a small finance company based over in, I think, Beverly Hills.
Which again is kind of interesting at the point when cars were kind of, by the 20s it's not as interesting as if it had been 1908, but it's kind of a real classic California type of business. But again, we don't know anything about him beyond
Garages
that.
are narrow enough that there has not been a car in there, certainly not in the 50s, 60s. Nothing could fit.
Yeah,
It's way too narrow.
we won't tell anyone.
yeah.
Well, no, they still are. I mean, I didn't change anything about them, including the pedestals at the bottom, which is a bit of a hassle. I bought a Mini Cooper. That's what fits in there. And that's it.
You compromised.
Smart cars now.
All the cars. Yeah, we're heading back to the point where cars back in the 20s and 30s may have fit, and now whatever's coming up along now is going to fit into.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Well, I'll entertain a motion or any other discussion about the naming or...
Should we talk a little bit about the work plan?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I think just because this house is so special enough, it's going for the Mills Act, even if we give a few years for the work to be done, it's probably in the best interest of the house to consider the waterproofing on that wall, trying obviously topically first, if that buys us a few years. That's my opinion.
Okay.
I agree.
I'll work closely on that. I just know that some of these, we'll talk about the penetrating sealers sometimes do more harm than good, depending.
Okay.
So we'll see. Sometimes it's better to just keep replacing plaster and keep painting, and however often you're going to be doing that. But we'll investigate, and if anything confusing comes up, or if it's kind of a hard decision, we can bring it back to the commission.
Okay. Any other discussion? Are we
Naming?
Naming. How do you feel about the naming? Whether it's Sherwood or Gray?
Well, I agree with the commissioner, the chairman, that I think Sherwood should be in.
Yeah, I believe so. Ben Sherwood should be in.
If it was Sherwood Gray or / Gray.
Sherwood Gray. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Which goes back to what Commissioner Vidor hyphenated.
He doesn't like it, I can tell.
That's okay.
Just remember, it's tricky naming after architects in general. There's not a single Frank Lloyd Wright house called the Wright House except the one he built, or the one he built for himself in Oak Park. So with Sherwood, it's likely, but we can't say for sure. It's his only property that he designed in Glendale, but we don't know that, and so it's something you need to remember.
Gray Sherwood?
Yeah, I would
Put
Gray
Gray
Sherwood,
first.
yeah.
I would include
All right, I'll back up a little bit. I'll go with Gray, and let's
Yes.
let's not make it complicated.
I don't know, but it's your decision, obviously. But it's just really in terms of thinking about the future. When we, for example, we have two houses designed by Richard Fleming that have recently been designated. Neither of which would be called the Fleming House, because then what do we do with the other one? Or we could do Fleming 1 and Fleming 2. So.
But it sounds like I could be wrong, but I don't think he has done that many houses here.
No. I mean,
But I think this is unique, though. This
Right.
is one of the most unique Spanish Revival hillside home that I haven't seen for a long time.
and we're not proposing to name it the Sherwood House. There already is a Sherwood House, but, we do have precedent for hyphenated names, too. I think we have the Hewitt Baker House. I think that's two owners. And Sherwood is kind of a borderline interesting, significant person. He doesn't quite rise to the level of where the architect is, or designer is significant, but some of the things about his work in this area, especially the Disney Court and his association with storybook architecture and fantasized architecture is interesting. And so it's kind of interesting to be able to point out that we have a house by him in Glendale.
I agree.
It could go either way, really.
Okay.
Gray or Sherwood Gray.
Let's take a
or-
motion with any suggestions on the naming and
At least
also.
it's not the address.
Yeah, it's not the address. Yeah, I like to keep the address out of there for this particular house. But I'll take a motion with any conditions attached to it, aside from the work plan that we discussed.
That should be part of the motion.
Well, part of the motion, okay. But Jay, you said you gave me the motion.
Yeah.
I don't have it.
You don't have it? I have a copy of it.
Not I.
Well, I'll take a motion. Yeah, I didn't have it. Anybody wants to make the motion?
Okay, I'll...
Go ahead, Commissioner
No,
Trevecchia.
please.
Go ahead. Oh, here's
There you go.
Okay. This? Okay, moved by Commissioner Tupankin, second by,
We'll fill that in.
well,
okay. Okay, I move to name the house, yes, as Gray Sherman?
Sherwood.
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 And
I'm sorry, I'm not sure which
And the
one.
work, do we want to do the work plan here, too?
Yes.
well, that's part of the
Yes.
motion.
Yeah, there's a
Part of the
section
motion.
at the bottom for conditions that the commission adds, so that those will come last.
Okay.
Commissioner Tefenkin, basically, it's okay, you don't have to read the whole thing. Basically, what you're doing is you're saying you're making a motion to recommend to City Council that the property be listed on the Glendale Register. You're also recommending that the city enter into a Mills Act contract with the following condition, and then add the name at the first part, so.
You know what, why don't you do it and then I'll do it next time.
You picked the wrong person to do motions. I'm not very good at them either. Okay. Okay, I move that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend to City Council that the property at 1345 Cordova Avenue be designated as a historic resource and added to the Register of Historic Resources pursuant to the code. In addition, I would add to the motion that the home be named the Gray Sherwood House, and that the work plan, in conjunction with the Mills Act, includes work to ensure that water seepage is mitigated in the, on the retaining wall?
On the stairwell.
Stairwell.
And at the base.
At the base of the building, within a X period, right?
Right,
We
at
need to do
times.
that, so within a, what, 1 year, 2 year?
3 years, I think.
I think we've been doing 2 or 3.
2-year period, within a 2-year period.
Okay, I need a second,
Any-
Mr. Tefenkin.
I second it.
I'll second that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Roll call. Do you need to, excuse me, do we need to go over the conditions again, or no?
No, I've got those.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yay.
And who seconded?
Thank-
I didn't.
Commissioner Tefengi seconded. Thank you very much for bringing this application forward.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Okay, so the work will be completed by December 2013. We'll work on that together. And what I'll do is I'll amend the motion form so that we have a space to actually put whatever name we're calling the properties from now on.
And we designate this based on criteria D.
Second part of
Second,
D.
okay. Thank you. Thank you again. All right, we'll move on.
Thank you.
Item 7C, Commission discussion possible recommendation to City Council regarding citywide historic resource survey. And I believe this was sponsored by Commissioner Vidor.
Yes.
And do you need to do any presentation on this, Jay, or should we just go on to?
I've done some background research. I can answer your questions. I don't have a real presentation. I can give some structure and then pure discussion?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we have Commissioner Vidor start, her discussion, because she's the sponsor of the
Instigator.
item.
Okay. Well, I think my primary goal, I think in light of the fact that there seems to be, a tremendous amount of pressure on the budget, I'm not fooling myself to thinking it would be easy to have a citywide historic survey and the costs associated with that conducted in a short period of time. However, I think we should make some recommendations to City Council that they keep the notion of doing a citywide historic survey on the radar screen, and at such time as it can begin, or we could take part of the city and at least start a historic survey, that we do that. And the reason is because it lends a tremendous amount of predictability and precision to the process of development, redevelopment, remodeling, demolition. Often debates come up about the significance of properties that are to be altered or demolished, and there's a lot of money and time spent on project managers doing surveys to determine the significance of the property, and then there are debates about whether the information was valid. So if we have one firm hired to execute a survey of the entire city, then we have consistency, validity, and we have information that will lend predictability to the processes of development and redevelopment. So that was my reason for bringing it up. Having said that, I know it's not easy in a time like this when city services like libraries and teachers and all kinds of things are being cut because of budget deficits, to do something like this. But I think we should emphasize to City Council that this is an important element of city planning, and when the time comes, we need to get on it. And I'd be interested to know if people agree with that assessment, or whether they think that's too wimpy, that we should be pushing forward with it. I'm just, I don't want us to seem like we're completely out of touch with what's going on. Mm-hmm. And, we are not out of touch, but we also need to get this done at some point, because we're just going to keep wasting time and money if we don't eventually get it done.
Mm-hmm.
That's my spiel.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Anybody wants to add?
Well, I agree with Commissioner Vidor. It's nice to have a baseline to see exactly what we do have in the city of Glendale. And having walked for the election in all different neighborhoods, there's a gorgeous amount of homes that are there and available, and it would be nice to know exactly what we do have, and I think that would be the first baseline step.
Homes and commercial
Yes,
and institutional
correct.
properties, yeah, everything.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Tefangen, do you have something to say?
I would just be interested to see what other cities are doing. How is Pasadena? Are they...
Pasadena does not have a citywide survey. Mm-hmm. Pasadena does have an aggressive, they have a 12-person preservation staff, so they're able to identify historic neighborhoods and do a lot of kind of in-house work, developing historic contexts, which is kind of the basis of the survey, where you do the kind of historic narrative, what's the meaning of this area, or the multiple meanings of a building or an area. And then they also are getting firms to come in and do surveys of those areas. So they have a fairly aggressive program, but it's limited. It's kind of doing spot surveys. The only city in the area that's doing a citywide survey is Los Angeles, which is taking on the biggest survey project in the history of American cities right now. It's called Survey LA, and it's a minimum 5-year project, and it's received major funding from the Getty Institute. So the city of Los Angeles's financial commitment is in the millions, plus staff time. I believe the Getty grant was for another $2.5 million, and I think more on top of that. But they have people out in the field right now. They've actually completed some pretty large areas of Los Angeles. What they're not doing is looking at every single property. They're visually seeing every single property, but they're not documenting every single property. And that's the only way they could do a survey of that scope. And even a city like Glendale, we don't know what the survey methodology would be. But what Survey LA has done is it's created kind of a standard that I picture will be used, especially in terms of their digital data. They have people with tablet computers in the field that are preloaded with an amazing amount of information, including cultural information. When someone identifies that, Uncle Joe ran a barber shop that was, a real political center of a neighborhood, that information makes its way into the database. So they're kind of doing a multi-layered kind of survey, which is really interesting. And I think it's what we'd want to do also when we do a survey at the citywide level.
Thank you very much. Good question, Commissioner Tefangian. But I want to ask Commissioner Vidor, what's your intent, individual property, or is more like what you said, a visual, if we could go further in our discussion, you want to define individual?
Well, it was suggested to me by somebody that because, it's a vast project. I don't know how many parcels we have in Glendale, but it's a huge city, so we must have a lot, and that it would run in
80,000?
80,000, so it would run into the multi-millions. I don't know what the guesstimate of the cost of a survey in Glendale would be, but it would certainly be over $1 million, maybe even more than $2 million. And the question is, do we want to try to save, money and maximize our efforts by cherry-picking properties to survey? And I think that may be very practical, but it's not a good idea. I think my personal opinion is that when this is done, it should be done right. And it should be done certainly in segments. You can't survey the whole city at once, so you prioritize the areas that need help, or the buildings that may be threatened that need help, and you take it phase 1, phase 2, et cetera, but that it should be done formally. A firm should be retained to do the survey so there's consistency, and it should be a legal survey with all the required documentation filled out, and not be like a reconnaissance survey. It's got to be something that has some teeth, too, because the whole purpose of the survey is to avoid problems in the future.
Yeah. So, if you'd like, I could give some of the background information besides what's happening in LA. For first, two pieces of really good news, which is we are light years ahead of Los Angeles in terms of our existing regulatory environment, and we can all sit back with some level of security knowing that we have a demolition review ordinance so that every building over 30 years old that is proposed for demolition comes to the urban design staff. It's reviewed by me, and in many cases we will ask owners to give us more information, to do their historic report about a building by hiring a consultant to do that report, so that we're not just issuing demolition permits without understanding what is going to be lost. So that's the first piece. The second piece is we have design review. So it's, and the two things that affect historic character, obviously demolition or bad alterations that don't respect historic character. Through design review, we have some ability to kind of, account for historic character when we're looking at properties proposed for change. These are things that Los Angeles doesn't have, and most cities don't have both of those. It's pretty unique in Glendale. And when I've given presentations to kind of people from the preservation community, people will talk to me afterwards about, oh my God, I can't believe what you guys have. So that's just, it's important for the commission and for people in Glendale to realize that we have some solid kind of protections and some foresight in place already. Addressing the idea of doing this in phases, we're in the process of working on our first community plan update for North Glendale, and it's the first in a series of community plan updates. What these will be in aggregate is an updated general plan, ultimately. So we're dividing the city into sections that make sense, and currently we're doing North Glendale, which is basically all of the portions of Glendale in the Crescenta Valley down to Spar Heights and Montecito Park, kind of at the south end. So sort of where Verdugo splits off to Cañada. And as part of that, it would be ideal if we did a historic resource survey that was just the North Glendale Historic Resource Survey. But as you've identified, we don't have the budget to do that. So what we're doing as part of the proposal is identifying areas of stability, areas where we don't expect to see much change, where we're not going to be changing any of the zoning or height regulations that might impact the character of an area. And then we're identifying a few areas where we do see change coming. And in general, for the North Glendale area, and we can't say this will hold true for all of the future community plan surveys, but the areas of change are just in commercial areas. So all of the residential areas in North Glendale, we don't see any changes to zoning where single-family neighborhoods would become multifamily neighborhoods or commercial districts. And then in the areas where we have intense commercial use, like Foothill Boulevard, the Spar Heights Business District, along Honolulu and the Montrose Shopping Park, and near the Indian Springs Shopping Center, we've identified those areas where there will be limited amounts of potential change, where we don't see those areas staying exactly the same way. We're seeing areas that we're going to try to make more pedestrian-friendly, areas where we're going to try to change kind of building configurations to push parking away from, street-facing parking, and did a bunch of different considerations. So all of those areas are going to have a windshield survey done so that we will identify any historic resources in the areas where we see the greatest potential threat. And of course, that's not a citywide or even an area-wide survey, but it's making sure that when we do environmental review, to make sure that the document we're preparing takes into account potential impacts on cultural resources, that we've got everything identified. And we'll be working with members of the Crescenta Valley Historical Society who are going to be helping us with our identification of these resources up there. In terms of thinking about a citywide survey, what we've learned from Los Angeles is that it's not just a matter of identifying $1 million and saying, here, let's do a survey. There's a lot of political groundwork to be done, not just with council, but with other agencies at the city level, and also with the community. Not every person in the city is going to think that doing a citywide historic resource survey is a good idea, even though we're going to go to them and use the words that Commissioner Vidor just used. It provides predictability and consistency to the approach the city takes, and gives someone who doesn't want to keep a building that someone else might consider historic, gives them knowledge also. So it's kind of gives every kind of stakeholder some information about the place. But to do that means we're going to have to work with business groups, business owners, neighborhood groups, different types of property owners, to kind of do a whole educational outreach campaign that happens long before we get to the point where we're hiring a consultant with money. So any recommendation that the council is going to make, or I'm sorry, that the commission makes, I think we need to take that into consideration when, and I don't know that you're going to be making a formal motion today, or if it's something that requires a study session. I'm not sure, Alan, if you see that as a possibility.
A study session with the commission here, or ultimately with the council?
Commission or with council, or...
I think if the commission was inclined to recommend this to the city council, it would probably behoove us to have a more detailed study session, range of options for the commission, so that if you are making a recommendation ultimately to the council, that it's very well thought out and you actually have sort of thought through the strategy, and not simply say, we'd like a citywide historic survey, that there'd be some sense of cost or time or urgency, priorities, approach, and a number of the fashion, elaborating on a number of the kind of elements that Jay is sort of speaking to. So I think you'd want to, if you were to make a recommendation ultimately to the council, I think you'd want to have it very clearly considered.
I think it's a good idea to have a study session if we go to that direction, because we've done it in the past with the historical design guidelines. I don't know if you recall that, or you were not here maybe at that time. But we
I think historical design guidelines was before both Jay and I joined the city, so we'll rely on your memory, Chair Mardian.
We had a study session when the design guidelines were going through, because there was a lot of discussion and clarification, so I think that's a good approach. But before I get into too detail, I want to give opportunity to Commissioner Shire to say what you have to say on the subject.
Yeah, I had a question actually for Jay regarding grants. Are there any that we should be looking into or tapping into, or?
Yeah, the primary grant we are eligible for every year is a CLG grant because we're a certified local government, and the State Historic Preservation Office can give up to $25,000 a year. A grant like that could be used toward something like an initial study where a consultant could identify the steps that would be needed for a city of our size and character to kind of go forward with the survey, and to find out, because the survey is not just getting on the ground and looking at the properties, but there's the whole issue of historic contexts, which is something we're also doing for North Glendale. We're kind of beefing up the existing citywide historic context that we have that has served us well enough over the years, but when we compare it to what Los Angeles is doing and the amount of information they're pulling together from an amazing field of experts, we're not even close to that. The great thing about following on the heels of Los Angeles is that we're going to benefit from some of the cost savings that they're obtaining through kind of new survey techniques using the digital kind of devices and direct input into databases. And we're also going to be able to use information from their context, because the story of the suburbanization of Los Angeles is very similar to the suburbanization of Glendale story. In fact, the Ross Moines survey is going to be using some of the existing LA contexts. So I think if we used a grant like that to kind of prepare us to move toward a survey, that would be a great point to have a document that we can then, as the commission, could then take to City Council and say, this is what it would take. This is what we think we need to do. The grant application phase has just ended, sadly enough, so we would not qualify to apply for a grant until next spring, and then that grant would be awarded, if we got it, for October of 2012. In terms of other grants, the National Trust, we recently got a $10,000 grant to go to award the Ross Moines survey from the National Trust, and that's something called the LA County Preservation Fund. I think $10,000 was the maximum for that, and that's what we got. So you can see it's not like we have people, the Getty is probably a once-in-a-lifetime thing, what happened in Los Angeles, and I don't see them, because if they came to us, then the floodgates would open, and where else would, who else would be asking? But that's, we could certainly explore other things, but in preservation, we could also become a Preserve America city, which is something we've been talking about, which is kind of an official designation through a federal program called Preserve America, which is similar to the Save America's Treasures program. It's kind of the Bush administration version of Save America's Treasures. And as a Preserve America city, and this one I don't know the maximum grant amount, but we could qualify for something. The problem with that is all of these federal grant programs, who knows how much longer, but we could certainly look into it. Mm-hmm. But if we put ourselves on a schedule to a $25,000 CLG grant, which is more realistic for us to get, could put us in a range where we could get a decent study from a consultant about what it would take to do this. And some of that we might be able to put together more quickly, though, kind of at staff level. So we'd have to see if that's worth it.
Okay.
Because that sounds like a good approach. If we can kind of gain some information from the Los Angeles, survey, even if that gives us a few months to get there. Meanwhile, hire a consultant if we can get that grant for next year. So we're really a little more prepared with what we even want to go to council with, using some of the professionals' information and their recommendations to us that might help us determine what approach and scheduling and that type of thing. So although we've missed it for this year, if this next year gives us an opportunity to wait for more information from LA,
that's actually a good idea.
That might put us on a good schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're learning every few months when I talk to the people in LA, and hopefully you remember Janet Hansen came to our January meeting. She's constantly learning new things and learning how quickly the survey's happening more quickly than they thought it would in some areas. In some cases, it's, the cost is different than they were expecting in a good way. So, I think we can learn a lot from them.
Thank you, Commissioner Shire. I think it's a great conversation here we're having on this. I think somewhere along the way we need to do the survey, but I agree with some of the comments due to the economic climate right now and the budgetary. Maybe we should approach it piece by piece. I think that makes sense because I'll go back. How long it took to do the Craftsman survey? What area?
Over a year. That started before I started.
If I recall, it was a little over a year.
And what part of did it cover all? I don't think it covered all Glendale.
Oh, no. It just covered Craftsman in the higher density multifamily neighborhoods.
That's correct.
Very
multifamily.
Specific.
Okay. And how did we do that? Refresh my memory. By volunteers?
We had volunteers. We had volunteer training. We had a consultant who put together kind of a book about how to identify Craftsman houses and their features. They held training sessions. All of our planning staff participated. A lot of members of the Historical Society and some of the neighborhood groups participated. They all went through these trainings, and then they went out in the field and, began their survey.
So there wasn't really much cost.
Yeah, I
Aside
think we
from
also
staff time.
got, I believe we got a $25,000 CLG grant for that.
And how effective that craftsman survey is? I know economy is slacking.
It's
How much
another topic on the agenda to look at how effective that's
But
been.
before we get there, we use it regularly.
Okay.
People contact us about craftsman houses fairly often, and we use the survey pretty
Oh,
regularly.
I use it because you gave me the seat, and I'll go online. But how? Let's say we assume, I don't know which direction we go. Let's say we do it partial areas. How do you prioritize those areas?
Well, the community plans is a good way to do that.
Okay.
We don't know what the next community plan boundary is at this point. We'll be finishing up with the North Glendale plan this year, and then we'll kind of identify how we're going to roll that out in the future, but it's a multi-year process, definitely.
I know this is a major task I think we're undertaking. I mean, it's going to take a few years, I'm sure.
Yeah, there are different ways to prioritize. You can look at areas, kind of like the Craftsman survey. You identify areas where the potential for change is greatest and the potential need of survey information is greatest, and make that your first priority. You can also do it to go along with our community plans, and that may coincide or may not, depending on which area we choose for the second community plan.
Because we're moving forward now, we have some districts, we have design review, we have, the reason I'm saying maybe we should take areas that will be impacted if the economy starts picking up, which is even you might say commercial areas, but next to Central, there's all these other streets that have multifamily zoning, which have, aside from Craftsman, there's a lot of other structures there.
Yeah,
So-
we have the downtown business district we have covered through the DSP survey, so that's still, in use. But you're right, some of the areas around where there could be kind of
Yeah, we'll filter.
residual effects.
Yeah, they would definitely will, because those are all multifamily zone, both side of Brand and Central and Pacific, although some are low density, but there's quite a bit might take place, and also around Adams Hill. I mean, I know Adams Hill is already overbuilt, but the area north of that is also,
Stuff there.
there's quite a bit of, those duplexes, triplexes, Spanish, all these little interesting architecture there. But with that, I don't know how we want to approach this at this point. Are we going to say, okay, we want to initiate something?
At this
if we
point,
agree on it?
I think we can wait at least a few months, talk to Los Angeles, get some more feedback where they are, and have a study session
Okay.
with presentation from me, from other staff possibly. Not sure if it would be appropriate for the LA staff to come in and give us an update, but if that's possible, we could do that. I think the idea of setting a timeline, hoping that we can get the grant, which is of course not a given, but we've gotten them before, and we should for something like this. It's exactly the type of thing that they are looking to fund through the grant program, and putting ourselves on a schedule to do a lot of our background work through next spring. And then once next spring comes, we're ready to say exactly what we want and what sort of kind of study we were expecting, and then apply for the grant. Hopefully we get that, and then move forward with that. Then we have a document that can serve as a blueprint when we go to council and say, this is the direction the Preservation Commission would like to move in. This is what it could cost. This is how much time it could take. These are some of the ramifications. This is the type of outreach we need to do into the communities, the various stakeholder communities. That certainly seems like a good direction to go. It seems like it's a long time, though, waiting through next year.
I need to move on. I think we need to move on it as soon as we can, or wait until, like Commissioner Shire said, get some of that technology in place, and help us move forward.
And if I may, Chair Mardian, as Jay mentioned, we're working on the North Glendale plan. That will be coming to you along with the North Glendale context statement, as amending our current citywide context statement, as well as the sort of windshield survey that Jay is suggesting that we intend to do for those areas, essentially the commercial areas up in North Glendale. We expect that that's going to be coming in front of the commission this summer, probably June or July, for your consideration, recommendation review, and perhaps as we kind of finalize that schedule, we can think about maybe having a sort of mini study session the meeting prior to talk about how this is going to work so that when you do see it, you ultimately have a framework for understanding what's going to be a fairly dense collection of information to process. But I think in terms of thinking about surveys, using community plans or segments of community plans as the structure, that'll be coming to you this summer.
Okay. Thank you very much. So do we continue this discussion, in other words, or?
Yeah, we can keep this as an ongoing item.
Yes.
And
I feel like if we don't have a motion for something today, i.e. a study session or whatever, that we need to re-agendize this because
we'll keep it on the agenda.
we need to continue to discuss it.
What we could do, as Alan mentioned, either June or July, we bring the North Glendale to the commission. I wonder, Alan, if doing a study session after might be more productive so that the commission can look at what we obtain and the direction we're going, and then we can focus on kind of a citywide survey, which is a much expanded version of what they'll be looking at.
Well, perhaps I could do both. What I was actually thinking is that we would do a mini study session prior to your review of the North Glendale plan, specifically to prepare you sort of understanding the structure of the North Glendale plan. But then maybe we do the full-on study session thinking about citywide context after you've reviewed the North Glendale plan. So we can strategize that a little bit.
Yeah. But in terms of the year's schedule, August, September, we could come back and actually talk very specifically about, where we want to take this in terms of a grant application and what we might need to do for that.
So can we take a motion based on what you just said? Or?
I don't know that we need to.
Okay.
I think we'll keep this as an open item.
Okay.
We'll keep it on the commission discussion calendar, so it's going to come back, recycle every month.
Okay.
And we can either give updates or skip a month if we need to as we go on.
Thank you, Jay. Anything else you want to add, Commissioner Vidor, to the discussion?
No, as long as we have an additional discussion, because I was hoping today we could have a motion to commission a study session so we could talk about, scope of survey, methodologies, approach, things like that. And I know we're planning to do that, so I would like to ask that we agendize this further so that we can get to the point where we're actually planning a study session, scheduling a study session.
I believe by the commission's next meeting, we'll know the schedule for the North Glendale plan. That'll be firm, I believe, Alan?
Yeah, I think by May we'll have a very good handle on what that schedule is.
And then at that point you can vote, and we'll say August, September, whatever it is, that we'll have the more formal study session focused on the citywide survey.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, if I recall, I think we're tentatively scheduling North Glendale to come to the commission in June, which is the end of June. So we may very well be giving you a little update on how what you're going to be seeing in June come our meeting in May. So may start as soon as our next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Loomis. I appreciate the discussion that Vidor is bringing. I know you like to move on it, but apparently there's
Planning is a good thing.
process this. But with that, we'll move on to the other item. If anybody else has no other questions on the issue that we're discussing. Okay. Item 7D, Commission discussion consideration of moving HPC hearing to the evening.
Okay, I've done some preliminary background research on this. To start, Director of Community Development, Hagani, is, of course, open to the idea of moving the Commission's meetings into the evening, but has kind of given me some background in terms of how that happened when the DRB, the Design Review Boards, moved from their afternoon meetings to the evening. So I just want to prepare the Commission that this is a multi-month process that doesn't just involve identifying open slots. As of now, there's only one open evening slot in the entire month's calendar for all of the boards and commissions. There's one night available. So this will go through the city manager's office, in terms of, is that slot something that's appropriate for the commission? It has to go through the finance department because there are budget issues that you wouldn't expect in terms of overtime for planning staff, for GTV6 staff. So budget implications that I would have never even thought about are out there. So we'll follow the process that we used for the design review boards, which I don't know an outline of that at this point, and expect that sometime during the summer we'll have an idea of whether this can happen, and if it can, when it does happen. So,
Just for a record, before we get too detailed into the conversation, I have a letter from the Glendale Historical Society, I believe. Greg Grammer.
Vice President.
On behalf of the Board of Directors of Glendale Historical Society, I would like to encourage the Historic Preservation Commission to change its meeting time to the evening. And it says this would allow our board members of preservation community and the public participation in the process by attending HPC meeting and commenting on matters under discussion and consideration. Just for the record, we have a support from the Glendale Historic Society wanting the meetings in the evening. Then with that, any other questions? So we'll have to wait until you come back to us.
yeah, well, we'll find out exactly what the process is. It'll probably be conducted by Hassan as he takes us through the upper echelons. And yeah, next month we should have an idea how long that will be and what it's going to be.
But the commission is in support of the meeting, every one of us in support of
Yes.
this? Okay.
Yes.
Could we hear which day of the month it is, just in case that
Yeah.
sways
that's a
us
good one.
either way?
It's still a Monday. It's
still a Monday.
the
Oh, okay.
third Monday rather than
Oh,
the
okay.
fourth Monday. So,
And what other
Friday night.
commissions meet in the
yeah, right, yeah, Saturday morning at 7 a.m.
No, Saturday.
What
What
other?
the commissions meet in the evenings, if any?
Almost all of them
All
at
of them
this
now.
point. The committee. What's the commission
The only
for
ones.
women?
Just to run through, Monday night, actually, the fourth Monday of the night is Transportation and Parking Commission. Of course, City Council meets every Tuesday night. Planning Commission meets alternating Wednesday nights. Design Review Board meets every Thursday night. We don't have commissions meeting on Friday night or at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning.
But there are other boards and commissions that we're not as familiar with
Right.
because all of the other Mondays have evening meetings.
I believe Civil Service meets on Wednesdays.
Civil service,
Yeah, those are
Arts
just,
and culture.
arts
Arts and Culture meets
during the
Thursday
day.
afternoon.
Yeah.
Parks is one of the only other commissions
Afternoon
that still
meetings.
meets during the afternoon. And
In fact, Parks moved to the afternoon in order to accommodate design review boards. So there was negotiation between different commissions and departments so involved in that one.
Walking on fine ground here.
this could be a real fireball.
Well, just one other thing I would add is that right now, any of the planning, community development department and planning division commissions, planning commission and DRB that meet in the evening start at 5 o'clock. So we'd be wanting to start consistently with those other commissions. If HPC was to move to the evening, it would be a 5 o'clock meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to?
I was just wondering if it does or doesn't work out for the evening, could we consider moving it to, say, like 4 o'clock or something that might allow people to come, or at least come by 5 if they had jobs, and we're trying to get more involvement from the community and the Historic Society. Does it make sense to move it, or are we kind of at a 2 o'clock versus a 5 o'clock?
They need to keep, since the length of the meetings is unpredictable and we
Yeah.
sometimes go 3 hours, and someone else may be coming in at 5, and I'm not sure GTV may have to do something in between.
Kind of on the schedule.
Yeah, so they're going to be telling us what
Right.
works
Okay.
time-wise, and then we'll do our best.
Commissioner Vidor and I picked up a good discussion item that's going to go on for a while. All right. Thank you very much.
Security.
With that, I have nothing else, I believe. Any other comments or any informational matters from staff?
Just real quick, you already mentioned, I'll just reiterate that tomorrow is the council presentation of the resolution to the Historic Preservation Commission, along with Glendale Historical Society and Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley, calling May national. It's part of National Preservation Month festivities around the country. What I would love to hear from any members of the public or from our commissioners in the future is ways that we might be able to celebrate this in a meaningful way through either events, educational opportunities, probably not this coming month, but in future months. One thing that we're missing right now is the display case in the City Hall lobby used to get preservationed every May, filled up with photographs and information about our program and some of our resources. And because of the floor work in there, that's been moved. So I don't know if a case is coming back, but I think this is a good time for us to think creatively about what we might do next year and the types of programming we might want to have to kind of make May kind of a special month. So, and in keeping with that, the California Preservation Foundation has its annual preservation conference in May each year, and they alternate between Northern, Southern California and Southern venues. And this year they're in Santa Monica. This is coming up May 15th through the 18th. So I encourage the commissioners and anyone who's interested in preservation to attend. The sessions, especially on Monday and Tuesday, are kind of the more intensive educational sessions. And we're going to have some of our staff there so that our staff can get kind of better versed in preservation kind of policy and philosophy issues. That's a great opportunity now that they're in town.
Thank you, Jade. I was going to mention that also because I was a member. I don't know, the city is a member still.
City's a member.
And they do have a lot of great things. I've attended a few of them. Actually, there's one subject matter, I think it's how to define integrity of the building. I don't know if it said Laguna Beach. I don't know if that's...
That could be when they do workshops also. This is their annual conference, but then they also do workshops up and down the state.
That might be interesting too.
Commissioner Vidor and Commissioner Shire, I believe, went to one.
Yeah, this one is about defines it, how to define integrity and historical integrity on the building. I think it's a good thing to go to. Thank you, Jay.
You know which day that was?
I'm not sure, but I have it on the email. I'll forward it to you if you like, because that's...
Yeah, I could send you all. In fact,
think
didn't
you
I
did.
send a link
Yeah.
to it
Did.
on the
Yeah.
recent? Yeah. So.
Should we, sorry,
That's go ahead, I'll mention.
should we agendize the consideration for how to celebrate Historic Preservation Month for upcoming years?
that is a great
Just
idea.
so we
Sure.
don't forget
Keep
to
it on
talk
the
about
record.
it.
Very good.
I have one minor update. My May issue of Sunset Magazine arrived yesterday, or actually Saturday, over the weekend, and they have a little profile. Their sort of weekend escape is a regular feature they have. Features Glendale this month, and among other things, highlights the Brand Library and Alex Theater as destinations in Glendale. I understand Ms. Vidor was consulted by Sunset regarding that. So.
Yes.
I had a fact checker call me a few months ago and name mistakes.
Okay. Not that I saw. No. My favorite restaurants were all included, but I'll not give them a plug. They've already got a good enough one.
These the workshops or the seminars, we have to pay for it?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no budget as there has
At
been
one
in
time, the
past
city
years.
was paying for it
Yeah.
when we attended. Okay.
Those days
They're still over.
Sadly gone.
Gone, okay.
left. Commissioner Shire sponsored discussion of May as Preservation Month. Did anyone second that officially?
I'll second.
Okay. Adjourn?
And we'll take a motion to adjourn. Thank you very much.
I move to adjourn.
Adjourn? Okay, thank you.